The American Dream. It's a term that many here use in the United States. However, what does it really mean, and does everyone really have the same number of opportunities to reach it? In this video, that is exactly what I'll be attempting to demonstrate and include some real-life examples here in the Metro Detroit area, as well as other ideas beyond that. The American Dream is a term that's loosely defined as having a stable income and a reasonable standard of living in the United States, is generally a term associated with what many consider today to be the modern-day middle class. The phrase was originally coined by writer James Truslow Adams in his book entitled The Epic of America from 1931. However, the term took off in popularity almost immediately after the end of World War II. The American Dream was initially defined as a dream of a land in which everyone with opportunity for each according to his ability or achievement. Sounds great, right? Albeit seeming a little bit nationalistic, which is the least problematic part of it in the long run. The reason it's problematic is because in practice, the idea of the American Dream would be used to segregate and disadvantage minority populations. It may seem like a strong statement, however, delving into this issue, it becomes more obvious and what the true intent was for some circles. Many in the late 1940s and 1950s interpreted it as essentially to have a nice, somewhat large house in the suburbs to raise a family with a car to get everywhere with. From the beginning, the people who designed and lived in these types of car-centric suburbs had, well, certain agendas.
Why did you select Levittown to live?
We were looking for a place to buy a home. We looked at Levittown, and we liked the homes here. We liked the advantages that Levittown seemed to offer, and we understood that it was going to be all right, and we were very happy to buy a home here. We have tried to keep the discussions away from the children. We're doing it for the children, but I don't feel that they are old enough to understand the problem as it is.
Do you think a Negro family moving here will affect the community as a whole?
Definitely. I think that, well, the property values will immediately go down if they are allowed to move in here in any number.
Racism, that was the agenda. One of the most glaring examples of the American Dream disadvantaging minorities with housing post-World War II was the creation of the modern-day suburbia with Levittowns. The name comes from the hamlet of Levittown, New York, that was originally built as a planned community for veterans returning from World War II. However, the hamlet would enforce discriminatory practices on who could live there. For residents looking to live in Levittown, Clause 25 of the Standard Lease Agreement to buy a house in Levittown stated, in bold and in all caps, that the houses cannot be used or occupied by any person other than members of the Caucasian race. This, along with many other factors with segregation by services, essentially begins what is known as redlining. Redlining is generally defined as a discriminatory practice where services or housing is denied based on race or ethnicity. Places with more Caucasians or whites would typically receive much more investments, while areas with minorities and low-income people would be seen as hazardous to invest in. What would accumulate would be a stark contrast in the quality of life between places not too far from one another, which would then lead to isolation between different groups of people, specifically the Caucasians and African Americans. However, similar practices would be done with Latin Americans and East Asians. These stark differences would prompt real estate companies to make divisions between these areas to make access more difficult for impoverished communities. Initially, it would start with walls being put up, however, it would quickly change for more stronger and more pronounced barriers. These would mainly be with roads, like highways and major intersections. Due to the rising popularity of cars, more roads would have to be built. It happened to be quite convenient for them to be put in places between areas of differing incomes, with neither side being able to easily interact with one another. Essentially blocked many low-income areas from having any access to prosperity, letting many to conveniently ignore many of these issues. Many low-income neighborhoods had a sharp increase in crime due to lack of economic opportunities. Although efforts would be made to fix some of these issues, such as with housing, with what became known as government projects, it only created new ones. Trying to fix places that are already at a strong disadvantage towards its population is extremely difficult, as it would require a substantial amount of money that more prosperous communities would not approve of. With all that stated, numerous forms of segregation are generally easy to come across, especially around the area I currently live in, here in the Metro Detroit area, and sometimes is considered one of, if not the most, segregated areas within the United States. It didn't happen overnight, and the legacy of it has been left for all to see. I live in the Dearborn area, and I've seen it for myself. For example, here's the border between Dearborn and Detroit. It's clearly visible above on a map, such as on Google Earth. Here's the view in real life. There's a fence between the border, clearly separating a pre-existing neighborhood with the parking lots of an Orthodox church and a mosque, which were extended as it could have been a street or extended the neighborhood. neighborhood, but was abruptly cut off. This is probably one of the most extreme examples I can think of within my vicinity, especially when just looking at a map of the area. Another example is the Birdwood Wall, which used to separate a predominantly African-American neighborhood from a newly built white Caucasian neighborhood at the time. Today it stands as a reminder from the time period when walls separated differing racial neighborhoods. Heading just a little more north, you'll reach 8 Mile Road, which the wall would later be named after. 8 Mile Road serves as a major road and is not only the border for Detroit, but Wayne County as a whole. It, along with some small cities to the north, separate Detroit from more affluent cities like Royal Oak and Warren, among others in both Oakland and Macomb counties. Another prominent example of segregation, and one that is not mentioned as often, are industrial zone complexes. The eastern border of Dearborn and Dearborn Heights, for instance, is very industrial and is where most of Dearborn's manufacturing and heavy industry lies. Its placement, once again, acts as a buffer between the two cities. As a result, what happens with dividing cities like this? Well, to start, on more anecdotal evidence, my mom used to live in southwest Detroit close by, and she used to bike along this path. The path doesn't seem too harsh when looking at a map, however when you're there in real life, it's much more daunting as it crosses several large roads and goes over a freeway. Also, because the area is so close to the aforementioned industrial areas, it causes all sorts of pollution issues, accompanied by a smell that would travel into local communities. It is a theme across the country that many of the communities of color always zoned into or close by with areas of heavy industry that causes major health concerns for them, a problem that is ignored by many outside of the communities of color. So also, what kind of devastation can this have on communities of color that may have had white families living there originally? Well, my father also used to live in Detroit near Hamtramck, also close to the infamous vacated Packard plant, from 1974 to 1980. Today, his home looks like this. If I'm not mistaken, you used to live here, didn't you?
I did, right there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not a whole lot now.
It's all gone.
Also, a few blocks away and nearby was the location of this photo that was taken of my father in early 1976. Today, the same spot looks like this. Here's where that photo was taken. It looks about the spot, like that looks like where that creek was, so, yeah.
The yield sign's still there.
Yeah, but,
The school fence is still there.
and
But all the houses, they're gone.
yeah, pretty much gone. While some positive things of interest are beginning to happen in the area once again, overall it's a shell of what it once was, but this is a theme that plays out in many lower income communities. This, coupled with a lack of opportunities, makes places like this very difficult to redevelop, and it unfortunately isn't hard to see why anyone wouldn't want to live here, as urban decay is everywhere. The American dream was originally a term used to describe a life lived greater than most, if not all, other places. However, when attempting to fulfill this vision, many powerful leaders and real estate agencies would lobby towards their own racist and xenophobic agendas. Separation would be seen as a necessity to many of them, and in many ways this would be acted upon would make irreversible changes in neighborhoods and cities across the United States. It caused an already disadvantaged group of people to have less opportunities while cutting them off for more opportunities by causing natural and sometimes not so natural barriers. In recent times these issues have been highlighted more so than before, and progress is being made, albeit slow. However, at the end of the day, attempting to fix a system as well as communities that were set up for failure and isolation to begin with will take many generations to correct. And the question is there enough willpower to do something about it and bring positive changes for the betterment of society as a whole? Or is the American dream just that, an unobtainable dream for some?